The Choice Factory by Richard Shotton. Picture this. It's just past 3 in the morning on a freezing March night in 1964, New York City. A young woman named Kitty Genovese is walking home after her shift, managing a bar. Her apartment is barely 100 feet from where she parked her car, a quick walk she's done 1,000 times before. Tonight, though, everything changes. As she passes under those quiet, tree-lined streetlights, someone spots her. A man starts following her, and just yards from safety he attacks, driving a knife into her back. What happens next isn't just another tragic headline. It becomes a turning point in how we understand what makes humans tick. The New York Times reported something almost unbelievable. For more than half an hour, 38 of Kitty's neighbors, ordinary, decent people, watched from their windows as this killer attacked her 3 separate times. Twice, when apartment lights flicked on and voices called out, he actually ran away. And twice, he came back to find her again. Through this entire nightmare, stretching over 30 minutes, not one person dialed the police. Someone finally made the call, but by then, Kitty was already gone. The whole city erupted in outrage. How on earth could this happen? How could 38 people witness a murder and do absolutely nothing? Everyone assumed it was a story about apathy, about how cold and heartless big city life had made people. But 2 psychologists, Bibb Latané and John Darley, read that story and thought something completely different, something that sounds almost backwards. What if nobody helped precisely because there were so many witnesses? What if the real problem wasn't that people didn't care, but that responsibility got scattered among too many people? This single, haunting question opens the door to a hidden world that runs our lives without us even knowing it. It's the world Richard Shotton explores in his brilliant book, The Choice Factory. This isn't just another marketing book. It's actually a manual for understanding how your mind works. Shotton reveals 25 invisible psychological biases that pull our strings every single day, shaping what we buy, who we trust, and what we believe. For decades, advertisers and marketers have been working with flawed assumptions about how people think. Shotton pulls back the curtain on a truth that's both simpler and way more fascinating. We're not the rational, logical creatures we imagine ourselves to be. By the time we finish this journey today, you'll understand why a beer suddenly tastes better when it's labeled best-selling, why admitting a flaw can actually make a brand more trustworthy, and why a higher price tag sometimes makes us want to buy something even more. Beyond that, you'll walk away with a toolkit of psychological principles that'll help you understand not just other people's choices but your own as well. So let's step inside the Choice Factory, starting with that terrible night in New York, to uncover the first, and maybe the most profound, secret of human behavior. The story of Kitty Genovese sent those 2 psychologists, Latané and Darley, down a rabbit hole of fascinating experiments. They wanted to test their wild theory that having other people around actually makes us less likely to help someone in trouble. In one study, they had a student fake an epileptic seizure while other students listened from a nearby room. When a student thought they were the only one who could hear the seizure happening, 85% of them rushed to help. But when they believed 4 other people were also listening, that number crashed down to just 31%. They named this the bystander effect. When responsibility gets spread across a group, we all unconsciously think someone else will handle it. Surely someone else will call the police. Surely someone else will help. The witnesses weren't monsters. They were just humans, caught in a psychological trap. This reveals one of the most fundamental lessons in the book. We constantly misunderstand why people do what they do. We look at those 38 witnesses and blame their character, their personality. We think, they must be selfish people. Shotton calls this mistake the fundamental attribution error, our tendency to believe that people's actions come from who they are, rather than the situation they're in. But as the bystander effect shows, context is king. The situation, the environment, often predicts behavior way better than personality does. A classic experiment from 1973 proves this beautifully. Psychologists at Princeton University gathered a group of trainee priests and told them they needed to give a talk in a building across campus. They split the priests into 3 groups. The first group was told they were running late and needed to hurry. The second was told they were right on time. The third was told they had plenty of extra time. Now, on the path to the other building, the psychologists placed an actor slumped in a doorway, moaning and clearly needing help. The question was, who would stop? Would it be the priests who were literally thinking about helping others? Or would the situation matter more? The results were staggering. Of the priests who were in a rush, only 10% stopped to help. Of those with plenty of time, 63% stopped. It didn't matter what kind of person they were or why they'd joined the priesthood. All that mattered was whether they felt rushed. The situation, not the person, determined the behavior. This is huge for anyone trying to influence behavior. We spend so much energy thinking about who to target, but hardly any time thinking about when and where. We obsess over the target audience but forget about the target context. If context is this powerful, then one of the most influential parts of our context is the people around us. We're social animals, constantly looking to others for cues on how to behave. This leads us to one of the most powerful tools in the marketer's toolkit, social proof. Simply put, we assume that what's popular is good. Robert Cialdini, a giant in this field, ran a now famous experiment in a hotel. The hotel wanted guests to reuse their towels to save on laundry and help the environment. The original sign mentioned environmental benefits, and it worked on about 35% of guests. Cialdini tested a new sign. This one simply stated that the majority of guests who stayed in the hotel reused their towels. Just a simple statement of social proof. The result? Compliance jumped to 44%. That's a 26% improvement, with zero extra cost. Then he got even smarter. He tested a third message, one that was super specific. It said, the majority of guests who have stayed in this very room reused their towels. Now the social proof was hyper-relevant. Compliance jumped again to 49%. This bias is everywhere. McDonald's used to have signs saying, billions and billions served. Whiskas cat food claimed for years that 8 out of 10 owners said their cats prefer it. It works because it's a mental shortcut. Instead of researching and analyzing every decision, we can just look at what others are doing. If it's the most popular beer at the bar, it's probably a safe bet. In fact, Shotton tested this himself, putting a small sign on a bar saying a particular porter was the week's best-selling ale. Sales for that beer more than doubled. But this powerful tool has a dark side. It can backfire spectacularly if you use it wrong. Shotton calls this negative social proof. Imagine you're trying to stop a bad behavior, like stealing wood from a national park. This was a real problem at Arizona's Petrified Forest National Park, where tons of petrified wood were being stolen each year. So park rangers put up a sign. Your heritage is being vandalized every day by theft losses of 14 tons a year. They thought they were discouraging theft. But what message were they actually sending? They were telling visitors that lots of people steal wood. They were normalizing the bad behavior. Psychologists tested this. They compared that sign to one that simply said, please don't remove the petrified wood. The negative social proof sign, the one highlighting how widespread the theft was, led to more than 4 times as much theft as the simple request. It actually led to more theft than having no sign at all. In Cialdini's words, it was a quote, quote, a quote, 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 a quote, quote, a quote, of Dussison. You see this mistake everywhere. Campaigns saying, only 4% of people donate blood, or a news site pleading, more people are reading our articles than ever, but fewer are paying for it. They're unintentionally telling you that the undesirable behavior is normal. The smart way to frame it is to flip the statistic. Instead of saying 4% donate blood, say join the 2 million people who are already donors. Always emphasize the popularity of the behavior you want to encourage. So we follow the crowd. But what happens when a brand wants to stand out from the crowd? What if your whole strategy is to be different? This brings us to another powerful bias: distinctiveness. Our brains are wired to notice what's different. Think about a long line of text: JRM, TWS, ALS, HUC, 153, FDY. What do you remember? You remember the number. This is called the von Restorff effect, named after the psychologist who discovered it in the 1930s. Things that stand out are more memorable. Shotton ran his own version of this experiment. He showed people a list of logos from 11 car brands and one fast food brand. Guess which one they remembered most? People were 4 times more likely to recall the fast food brand than the average car brand. It was memorable simply because it was different. This might sound obvious, but look around at most advertising. Car ads all show sleek vehicles on winding country roads. Watch ads almost always show the time as 10 past 10. Beer brands all sponsor football. There's a herd mentality that makes everything feel safe and familiar, but also completely forgettable. The greatest brands often achieve their status by breaking these category norms. In 2009, the price comparison website market was a sea of sameness. All the brands talked about functional benefits, how many insurers they compared, how much money you'd save. Then one brand, Compare the Market, broke ranks. Instead of another boring ad about savings, they introduced a family of Russian meerkats. It was absurd, emotional, and completely different. The result? The brand rocketed from 4th place to 1st in the market. They achieved their entire year's business objectives in just 9 weeks. Their distinctiveness paid off massively. The lesson is simple but profound. When the world zigs, zag. Apple used this principle brilliantly when they launched the iPod. At the time, all headphones were black. When you saw someone listening to music, you had no idea what device they were using. Apple made their headphones a striking, brilliant white. Suddenly you could see iPod users everywhere. It created the illusion that Apple was the market leader long before they actually were, which, thanks to social proof, made even more people want one. Those iconic white earbuds were perhaps their greatest marketing innovation. Now let's shift gears and talk about something we all deal with every single day: price. Our relationship with money is way stranger and more irrational than we think. We don't have an internal calculator telling us what something is worth. Instead, our sense of value is almost entirely relative. This is the bias of price relativity. Think of the famous optical illusion with 2 identical circles. When one is surrounded by large circles, it looks small. When the same circle is surrounded by tiny circles, it looks huge. Our minds don't judge things in a vacuum. We judge them by comparison. The same is true for price. Shotton demonstrated this by asking people if they thought a box of PG Tips tea, priced at £2.29, was good value. When it was compared to Tesco own-label tea at just £1, only 31% thought PG Tips was a good deal. But when he showed it to another group and instead compared it to a premium brand, Twinings, priced at £3.49, something amazing happened. Now, a full 65% of people thought PG Tips was good value. The product didn't change, the price didn't change, only the comparison changed. This is why introducing a high-end decoy product can be so effective. Psychologists Amos Tversky and Itamar Simonson demonstrated this with an experiment on cameras. When people chose between a $170 camera and a $240 camera, the choices split about 50-50. But when a third high-end option was introduced, a $470 camera, most people didn't buy the expensive one. Instead, sales of the middle option, the $240 camera, shot up to 57%. The expensive option made the middle one look like a sensible, safe compromise. We don't want the cheap, shoddy one, but we don't want to be ripped off by the super expensive one either. The middle option feels just right. This relativity is one thing, but our perception of price is also warped by how we pay. This brings us to the pain of payment. Paying with physical cash feels real. You see the money leaving your hand. It hurts a little. But paying with a credit card? That feels abstract, almost like playing with Monopoly money. An experiment at MIT proved this perfectly. Researchers held an auction for basketball tickets. Half the students were told they had to pay in cash, the other half by credit card. The average bid from the cash payers was $29. The average bid from the credit card payers? $61, more than double. The less tangible the payment, the less it hurts, and the more we're willing to spend. This is why casinos use chips instead of cash. And it's why the rise of contactless payments is so powerful for retailers. An experiment in London coffee shops found that people paying with cash tended to overestimate how much they'd spent, while people using contactless cards underestimated their spending. The memory of the purchase feels cheaper, which makes you more likely to come back. The way a price is presented can also reduce this pain. Removing the dollar or pound sign from a menu can boost sales by as much as 8%. It just feels a little less like you're spending real money. And then there's charm pricing, the magic of ending a price in a 9. We all know that £3.99 is basically £4, but our brains don't quite see it that way. Because we read from left to right, the first digit anchors our perception. We see the 3, and our brain encodes the price as being in the £3 range. An analysis by the sales platform Gumroad found that items with a charm price like $3.99 had a conversion rate 51% higher than items priced just a penny more at a rounded figure like $4. But what if a high price isn't a problem to be solved? What if it's actually an advantage? In certain categories, a higher price can actually increase a product's appeal and even its performance. This is the world of Veblen goods, named after the economist Thorstein Veblen. The psychologist Dan Ariely tested this with a fascinating experiment involving a fake painkiller. He told participants they would receive 2 small electric shocks, one before taking the painkiller and one after. Half the participants were told the pill cost $2.50. The other half were told it cost just 10 cents. Of course, the pill was just a placebo, a sugar pill with no active ingredients. But here's what happened. Among those who took the cheap 10-cent pill, 61% reported a reduction in pain. Not bad for a sugar pill. But among those who took the expensive $2.50 pill, a staggering 85% felt less pain. The high price set a higher expectation, and that expectation literally changed their physical experience. This isn't just about medicine. Our brains use price as a shortcut for quality. If it's more expensive, it must be better. This is why you might enjoy a glass of sparkling wine, but the moment you find out it's a £4.99 bottle from the corner store, you suddenly notice it's a bit too sweet. Your enjoyment isn't just about the liquid in the glass, it's about the story the price tells you. The way we first encounter a brand or product also has a disproportionate impact on our lasting impression. This is the primacy effect. First impressions are sticky. They create a lens through which we interpret everything that follows. In a classic 1946 experiment, the psychologist Solomon Asch described a person to 2 groups of students. He told Group A that the person was intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, and envious. He told Group B the exact same words, but in reverse order: envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, and intelligent. The descriptions were identical, but the order changed everything. Group A, who heard the positive traits first, formed a largely positive impression. They thought he was a capable person with a few minor flaws. Group B, who heard the negative traits first, saw him as a, quote, problem person, whose abilities were held back by his bad character. The first words created a direction for their judgment, and everything else was made to fit that initial impression. This is why a brand's launch is so crucial. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and if that first impression is negative, all your future messages will be fighting an uphill battle. This power of first impressions also relates to our expectations. What we expect to experience often becomes what we do experience. This is expectancy theory. A wonderful experiment by Brian Wansink at Cornell University showed this with brownies. He gave out free brownies to students but served them in 3 different ways: on a fancy china plate, on a paper plate, or just on a napkin. The brownies were all identical, but the students' experience was not. The brownies on the china plate were rated as excellent, those on the paper plate were good, and those on the napkin were just okay. Even more amazingly, when asked how much they would pay for the brownie, the students offered more than double for the one served on china, $1.27 compared to 53 cents for the one on the napkin. The presentation changed the expectation, and the expectation changed the taste. This means how you describe something matters just as much as what it is. Renaming red beans with rice to Cajun red beans with rice on a menu boosted its appeal by 13%. The more descriptive, evocative language created a better expectation, which in turn created a better tasting meal. Good copywriting is like a china plate. So if creating a perfect, polished image is this powerful, does that mean brands should never show any weakness? Not at all. In fact, one of the most counterintuitive and charming biases is the pratfall effect. It says that admitting a flaw can actually make a person or brand more appealing. The psychologist Elliot Aronson discovered this when he had students listen to a recording of a student answering quiz questions. The student was brilliant, answering 92% of the questions correctly. In one version of the recording, after the quiz, the student clumsily spills a cup of coffee all over himself. In the other version, this pratfall doesn't happen. Which version of the student did people like more? The one who spilled the coffee. The mistake made him seem more human, more approachable, less intimidatingly perfect. This works for brands too. Some of the greatest ad campaigns in history have been built on admitting a weakness. Volkswagen's legendary campaign for the Beetle in the 1960s embraced its flaws. One ad had the headline, "Ugly is only skin deep." Another simply said, "Think small." This honesty was disarming. It made people trust everything else, VW said. Avis, the car rental company, built their entire business on being number 2. Their famous tagline was, "When you're only number 2, you try harder." It was brilliant psychological judo. By admitting their weakness, they're not the market leader. They credibly establish their strength. They have better customer service. We intuitively understand that nothing is perfect. So when a brand is open about its flaws, we not only trust it more, we often like it more too. Guinness takes longer to pour, but that implies it's worth the wait. Listerine tastes bad because it's a serious, medicinal product. Admitting a flaw can be a powerful signal of confidence and honesty. Now, all these biases, from social proof to the pratfall effect, are powerful tools. But why don't more people in business use them? Why do so many brands still rely on bland, forgettable, and ineffective marketing? This brings us to a set of biases that affect not the consumer, but the marketer. The biggest trap is the curse of knowledge. Once you know something, it becomes incredibly difficult to imagine what it's like not to know it. A famous Stanford experiment illustrated this perfectly. A group of people were asked to tap out the rhythm of a well-known song, like "Happy Birthday," while another group had to guess the song. The tappers predicted they'd be successful about 50% of the time. After all, the song was playing perfectly in their own head as they tapped. The reality? The listeners guessed the song correctly only 2.5% of the time. To them, it wasn't a melody, it was just a series of disconnected taps. Marketers are the tappers. We're so immersed in our own products, our own jargon, our own strategies, that we can't imagine what it's like to be a normal consumer who spends maybe 3 seconds thinking about our brand in an entire year. This curse leads us to create ads that are too complicated, too full of insider information, and too subtle to be noticed by someone giving it a quick glance. We approve a poster design by scrutinizing it from 2 feet away in a boardroom, forgetting that a real person will see it for 2 seconds from across a busy street. This is compounded by overconfidence. Most of us think we're above average. A study found that 88% of drivers believe they're safer than the average driver, which is statistically impossible. Shotton surveyed people in the marketing industry and found that 83% of them claimed to be better at their jobs than their peers. This overconfidence makes us trust our own gut instinct way too much. We believe our next creative idea is going to be brilliant, so we don't feel the need to test it properly. We fall in love with our own ideas and fail to see them from an outside perspective. And finally, there's the danger of claimed data. The most logical way to understand customers, it seems, is to just ask them what they want. But this is deeply flawed because, as Shotton reminds us, people often don't know their own motivations. And even when they do, they don't always tell the truth. Remember the experiment where playing French accordion music in a supermarket wine aisle dramatically increased sales of French wine, while German Oompa music did the same for German wine? The music was clearly the biggest driver of the decision, but when shoppers were asked why they chose their wine, 86% of them insisted the music had no effect at all. They weren't lying. They were just unaware of the subtle contextual cue that had shaped their choice. Their conscious brain, as psychologist Jonathan Haidt puts it, thinks it's the Oval Office, but it's really just the press office, excellent at coming up with plausible-sounding reasons for decisions that have already been made by the subconscious. This is why observing what people do is so much more valuable than listening to what they say. The world of our choices isn't governed by rational deliberation. It's a bustling factory of mental shortcuts, environmental cues, and deeply ingrained psychological biases. Understanding how that factory works is the key to influencing behavior, whether you're trying to sell a product, encourage a healthy habit, or simply better understand the strange and wonderful workings of the human mind. As we step back and look at the landscape Richard Shotton has painted for us in The Choice Factory, the overwhelming feeling is one of humility. The book is a powerful antidote to the arrogance that so often shows up in business and marketing, the belief that we're rational creatures, that our customers are rational, and that a good argument is all it takes to win the day. Shotton shows us with one fascinating experiment after another that the truth is way more complex and interesting. Our decisions aren't made in some sterile logical vacuum. They're made in the messy, vibrant, and often confusing context of real life. We're swayed by what the people around us are doing, by the way a price is framed, by the color of a pill, by the plate a brownie is served on. These aren't minor quirks. They're fundamental drivers of human behavior. The most powerful lesson for me is the repeated demolition of the idea that we can simply intuit our way to success. The curse of knowledge is a particularly potent warning. As professionals, parents, or leaders, we're constantly at risk of forgetting what it's like to be on the other side of our own expertise. We think our message is crystal clear, while our audience only hears a series of disconnected taps. The antidote, as Shotton demonstrates throughout the book, is a relentless commitment to testing. Don't assume, test. Don't rely on your gut, test. Don't ask people what they'll do. Create a situation where you can watch what they actually do. So how can you start applying these ideas in your own life, right now? Here are just a few simple actions you can take. First, embrace the pratfall effect. The next time you're trying to build trust with someone, whether it's in a presentation, a job interview, or a simple conversation, try admitting a small, relatable flaw. Don't talk about a catastrophic failure, but a humanizing mistake. It's disarming, it shows confidence, and it makes everything else you say more believable. A little bit of vulnerability can be a superpower. Second, use the power of price relativity and anchoring. The next time you're presenting an option, think carefully about the comparisons you're creating. If you're selling a service with 3 tiers, remember that the highest priced option isn't just there to be sold. It's there to make the middle option look like the most sensible choice. Frame your preferred outcome as the safe, smart compromise between 2 extremes. Finally, practice becoming a better observer of social proof. Pay attention to how often brands tell you what's best-selling or most popular. But more importantly, think about how you can use this for good. If you're trying to encourage a positive behavior in your family or your team, Don't just talk about why it's a good idea. Find a way to highlight that most people are already doing it. Frame the desirable action as the norm, and you make it much easier for others to follow. The Choice Factory is more than a collection of clever marketing tricks. It's a profound exploration of the hidden architecture of the human mind. It reminds us that to influence others, we must first understand them. And to understand them, we must look past what they say and watch what they do, recognizing that we're all, in our own way, beautifully and predictably irrational. That was a summary of The Choice Factory by Richard Shotton. We've explored some of the core biases that shape our decisions today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful city. It can show you the layout, but it can never replace the experience of walking the streets yourself. The real magic of this book is in the delightful details of each experiment and the witty way Shotton connects these scientific findings to the real world of advertising. If any of these stories or ideas have sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about gaining knowledge. It's about gaining a new set of eyes to see the world with. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey into the human mind valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.